It is often said that life consists of a tapestry woven from moments. Minuscule instances that initially seem insignificant. The way someone gazes at you, lingering just a heartbeat longer than expected. Or the fleeting moment when their fingers graze against yours as you reach for the salt. Insignificant details, seemingly innocuous at first glance, until they reveal their true nature. I once believed I was a good woman, a devoted wife, a mother who understood her role. But now, I find myself questioning that certainty. It began on a seemingly unremarkable Tuesday. Ordinary, unremarkable, devoid of any theatrics. Alone in the kitchen, I prepared dinner as the sounds of my children bickering over cartoons echoed from the next room. The unchanging routine, the persistent silence from my husband. He had remained silent for months, perhaps even years if I'm being truthful. His body returned each evening, yet his heart lingered in a distant realm. Perhaps through effort, or perhaps alongside another. I did not inquire. Fear gripped me at the thought of what the answer might be. And then, Jacob arrived. My brother-in-law, the younger sibling of my husband. He had always been a constant presence. Has always possessed that delightful allure. It's the kind of humor that catches you off guard, provoking laughter at the most unexpected moments. Recalls your preferred treat without needing to be prompted. He observed the details. He caught sight of me. The chipped nail polish I had yet to attend to. How I would instinctively reach for my wedding ring in moments of anxiety. He observed. For the first time in what felt like ages, I experienced the sensation of being truly acknowledged. That day is etched in my memory with vivid clarity. The sunlight streamed through the window, casting a perfect glow upon the table. The fridge emitted a steady hum, the sole sound that lingered in the space between us. And then he uttered those words. Only a single sentence, a solitary, silent, perilous phrase. A desire stirs within me. Only one. I sincerely hope you will agree. That is all. That was the entirety of his words. And my entire universe shifted. A chuckle escaped my lips. I gave a slight shake of my head. I went so far as to tell him he was out of his mind. Yet my heart, it found no laughter. It thudded with a forceful intensity, resonating loudly as if determined to overshadow all that surrounded it. I ought to have declined. I ought to have urged him to go. I expressed to him that it was incorrect. However, I chose not to. And now, I find myself lying awake at night, pondering the moment when everything shifted. Was it the instant his words escaped his lips? Or the instant I chose to stay? For since that day, everything has changed. Neither within my dwelling, nor in my soul, nor in the bond one share with my partner. Some individuals claim that temptation arrives like a tempest. Yet, mine arrived with a tender touch, whispering like a breeze before transforming into a force I could no longer withstand. And the most troubling aspect, at times when I reflect on it, I find myself uncertain whether I truly regret the experience or merely lament having been ensnared by the emotion. Should you ever find yourself poised at the brink of a boundary you never imagined you would traverse? Should you have ever yearned for connection with such intensity that you sought it in the most misguided of places, then perhaps, just perhaps, you will grasp the essence of this feeling. Join Heartfelt Tales Unfold, a realm where secrets come to light and each narrative etches its impression. I find myself in my early 30s. I have been united in marriage for 7 years. We are blessed with 2 children, each under the age of 10. They are the very heart of my existence. For an extended period, I believed that was sufficient. My spouse is named Carter. He isn't a terrible person. He exists in a realm apart. Perpetually occupied, perpetually weary, his profession requires extended hours and frequent journeys. He claims it is intended for our future. Yet, what of the present moment? When he is present, he occupies this space, yet remains distant. He consumes his meal in quietude, glances at his phone, responds in fragmented phrases. At times, I find myself uttering words merely to occupy the silence, to listen to the sound of my own voice, to reassure myself of my presence in this world. Yet, even in those moments, it feels as though one is conversing with an unyielding barrier. Once, our dinners resonated with laughter. At this moment, there is the gentle clink of forks against plates, the soothing sound of juice being poured, and the rare request for a sprinkle of salt. That is all. There was no eye contact, no warmth, just two adults existing side by side, akin to silent strangers navigating the complexities of raising children under the same roof. These days, even the car rides seem to carry a weight of their own. Only the hum of the engine and the crackle of radio static filled the air. Once, I inquired about how his day had unfolded. He replied, "Fine." That encapsulated the entirety of their exchange. Eventually, I ceased to inquire. "Cease your efforts." I whispered to myself, this is the essence of marriage as time unfolds. The initial flutter fades, and you find yourself in a state of mere endurance. Yet, beneath the surface, I longed for that sensation of being chosen once more. I longed for the feeling of being seen. It was then that Jacob began to appear with greater frequency. Carter's younger brother has recently gone through a divorce. He expressed that the solitude of his apartment was pushing him to the brink of madness, and he craved the presence of others. He would often drop by to see how we were doing, bringing small tokens for the children, mending leaky faucets, or installing new shelves. Small moments that Carter always seemed to overlook. Jacob stood apart from the rest, not merely enchanting, but fully engaged. He paid attention as I spoke, recalling the little details I mentioned in casual conversation. He would make light-hearted quips whenever he noticed the weariness in my eyes. He prepared dinner while I reclined on the couch, savoring a rare moment of solitude. Initially, it seemed inconsequential. He was family, stepping in to occupy the voids that Carter could no longer tend to. Yet, gradually, those spaces began to resemble doors, and I remained blissfully unaware of the moments when I was unlocking them. Jacob had a way of bringing laughter back into my life, even when I had lost touch with it. He would always notice the subtle changes, whether it was a new hairstyle or a fresh dress I decided to wear. He offered me compliments that were understated yet genuine, and I found myself anticipating his visits with an eagerness that felt almost excessive. The children held him in great affection. He exuded a playful spirit, a hands-on approach, and a warmth that I once hoped Carter would rekindle upon his return, yet that moment never came. On a particular night, Jacob lingered long into the evening. The children lay in peaceful slumber. We found ourselves on the porch, engaged in conversation. The atmosphere was crisp and refreshing. The sky hung in serene silence. And I confessed to him, almost inadvertently, that I felt unseen. His words were few. He gazed at me with a tenderness I hadn't experienced in ages. Not sympathy, merely comprehension. The memory of that gaze lingered in my mind. It was a gaze that conveyed, "I recognize you. I've always recognized you." In that instant, I understood just how deeply I craved to be acknowledged. Carter remained oblivious to the moments I wept in the shower or the nights I spent folding laundry, tears streaming down my face, yet Jacob saw it all. He perceived me in ways that Carter had long ceased to recognize, and gradually, that subtle recognition began to transform into something deeper, something perilous, something I had yet to define. Yet, I could sense it expanding in the gaps between the silences. Even then, I sensed that I was perilously near the brink. On a Thursday, the world unfolded in its usual rhythm. That morning, Carter embarked on a business trip. It was one of those 3-day conferences in a distant city, an event that hardly warranted his presence, yet he was determined to go. He offered little more than a fleeting farewell, kissing the children gently on their heads, and with a distracted, "I'll call you tonight," he slipped out the door. I observed his car fade into the distance, and a wave of relief washed over me. Isn't that peculiar? Neither sorrow nor yearning, merely a sense of liberation. It felt as though I could finally inhale deeply once more within the familiar walls of my own sanctuary. That afternoon, the curtain rod in the hallway came crashing down. The screws had remained loose for weeks on end. Carter repeatedly promised to fix it, yet the task remained untouched. I had ceased the reminders, abandoned the inquiries, and so I reached out to Jacob via text. It was merely a straightforward request. Could you lend a hand with something at home? He arrived in under an hour, toolbox in tow, his smile warm and recognizable. He quipped about my tendency to break things in Carter's absence. A chuckle escaped my lips. Perhaps it was too challenging, yet it brought a sense of satisfaction. He swiftly repaired the rod, yet he chose to remain. Instead, he inquired whether I had any tea. I agreed, and we settled at the kitchen table as we had countless times in the past, yet this moment carried a distinct weight. The gentle light filtering through the window bathed the room in a warm, golden hue. The silence in the house was strikingly profound. Silence envelopes the space, devoid of animated antics or hurried steps echoing through the corridor, leaving only us. Initially, our conversation meandered through whimsical topics, touching on television shows and nostalgic childhood recollections. Yet, he inquired whether I found happiness. I paused, caught in a moment of uncertainty. I took a slow sip of my tea and replied, I don't know. He merely nodded, as if he were already aware of the truth behind my uncertainty. As he prepared to depart, he paused, turning to me with his hand lingering on the back of the chair, his gaze locked onto mine. You know, he remarked, a hint of shyness in his smile, I've often pondered what it might have been like had we crossed paths earlier. I felt a sudden stillness within me. My heart performed an odd dance, as if it skipped a beat yet landed with a weightier thud. I offered a hesitant smile, a reflex ingrained in me. I chuckled it away, unsure of any other course of action. Yet, his eyes held no laughter. They persisted in their attention towards me. Gentle, unwavering, and strikingly candid. After that, he departed. There was neither an embrace nor a farewell that stretched into the realm of the poignant. Only the soft sound of a door gently shutting in his wake. Yet, as the night unfolded, sleep eluded me. I reclined in bed, the chill of Carter's side of the mattress stark and uninviting, as I found myself endlessly revisiting those words in my mind. If our paths had crossed earlier, it wasn't the words he spoke that mattered. The way he expressed it was everything. As if it were no laughing matter. As if it were more than just a fleeting notion. As if he truly intended it. And even more troubling, a part of me longed for us to have done so. I found myself conjuring thoughts that were best left unimagined. Dialogues that remained unspoken. Instances that never came to be. Not at this moment. I convinced myself it was merely a matter of curiosity, a fleeting touch of loneliness. Yet, beneath the surface, I sensed a change had occurred. Not due to Jacob uttering something taboo, but rather because I wished to hold on to it, to ensure it lingered in my memory. Because I clung to it as if it were a secret I wasn't prepared to reveal, even to my own heart. That was the night I ceased to view him in the same light. Perhaps that was the evening when I began to perceive myself in a different light as well. I made an effort to dismiss it, to erase his words from my mind, to convince myself it was merely an uncomfortable encounter, just Jacob being his usual self. Yet the reality lingered, echoing in my mind repeatedly, akin to a melody trapped in my thoughts that I never wished to listen to. Each time I found myself in the kitchen, the memory of his gaze would wash over me. With each gentle sway of the hallway curtain, my thoughts drifted to his hands, deftly adjusting it. His voice, his smile, that infuriating sentence. Had our paths crossed earlier, I found myself engulfed in a whirlwind of self-doubt. Was I in solitude, or was I yearning for peril? Was I yearning for love, or merely craving the recognition of my existence? It's a challenge to articulate the experience of cohabiting with another, sharing a bed, yet feeling an overwhelming sense of solitude. Carter was not unkind. He wasn't cruel, yet all that remained between us was a sense of obligation. Invoices, school drop-offs, shopping lists, timetables. A few weeks ago, we celebrated our 7th anniversary. He let it slip from his mind. I had no inkling until I brought it to his attention the following day. He remarked, "Oh, sorry. I've been swamped lately." And that was all. Absent is the card, the embrace, the endeavor. At times, I would find myself standing before the mirror just before sleep, gazing at my reflection as if attempting to uncover what he once saw, what had faded from view. He would glide his fingers over the freckles adorning my shoulder. He would often refer to me as beautiful, even when I emerged from slumber with tousled hair. He scarcely glanced in my direction. And Jacob observed it all. I began to alter my style of dress. Not in a dramatic fashion. A touch more contemplation, a splash more vibrancy. Glossy allure. Even on days when I found myself without a destination. I convinced myself it was for my own sake, that I was merely seeking to reclaim a sense of well-being. Yet, beneath the surface, I was aware that when the moment arrived, with Jacob approaching, he would surely offer me a compliment. Nothing extravagant. Merely gentle, understated remarks such as, "That color complements you beautifully." Or, "You appear refreshed today." Refreshed. For years, I had known no true rest. Yet, in that fleeting moment, his words held a truth that captivated my belief. I found myself eagerly anticipating his visits, crafting excuses to invite him over, seeking his assistance with tasks I could have effortlessly managed on my own. A picture frame, a flickering light bulb, a drawer that refuses to budge. Every moment seemed innocuous, yet beneath the surface, there was a stirring in my stomach at the sound of his car arriving. The silence that enveloped the house in his absence weighed more than it ought to have. I reassured myself that it was trivial, merely tea, merely conversation, merely Jacob. Yet, in the recesses of my thoughts, a transformation was quietly unfolding. A truth I was reluctant to acknowledge. Each night, I would find myself lying in bed with Carter peacefully asleep beside me, my thoughts drifting to the way Jacob gazed at me from across the kitchen table. His gaze lingered, piercing through the layers of me that I believed had faded into obscurity. And the weight of remorse. It slipped in softly, a whisper I was powerless to mute. I had yet to commit any wrongdoing, not in a technical sense, nor in a physical one, but rather in an emotional capacity. I found myself in a place I had no business being. And the most painful aspect was that I had no desire to depart. What began as a simple cup of tea soon transformed into something far more significant. Following that night, the night he uttered those words, everything shifted. Not in the world, not within the confines of the house, nor in anything visible to others, but rather in the depths of my being and in his. Jacob began to visit more frequently. Not in any overt manner, not in a sudden burst, but rather slowly, organically, as if it were the most logical progression. He would mention he was in the area or that he had something to deliver for the children or wanted to see if the shelves he had put up were still sturdy. Yet, I was aware that we both shared that understanding. It transcended the shelves, the children, and the community. It revolved around an unnamed notion, lingering in the air like an unspoken secret. It was an unspoken presence, a mystery we both acknowledged yet refrained from confronting, endlessly orbiting our thoughts. He began to offer his assistance more frequently. An evening ritual of splashes and laughter with the little ones in the tub. Once upon a time. He possessed a unique ability to weave himself into the spaces that Carter had vacated. The children held him in the highest regard. They would implore him to linger for dinner, just to share one more enchanting bedtime tale. And when the house finally fell into silence, he would remain, savoring the stillness. We would nestle into the couch, losing ourselves in the world of movies. Not the romantic kind, just familiar and comforting elements. Yet, in those moments, his shoulder would still graze against mine. His laughter would echo in my mind far longer than it ought to have. And I found myself drawn closer. Not in a physical sense, but rather in an emotional one. Each evening began to resemble a trial I was uncertain I wished to conquer. It was on that fateful night. A tempest approached with alarming swiftness. In the distance, thunder rumbles ominously, followed by the relentless drumming of heavy rain against the windows. The lights danced momentarily before plunging the room into darkness. The children squealed with delight, their laughter ringing through the air. I ignited several candles, their flickering flames casting a warm glow in the dim room. With Jacob's assistance, I navigated the house, transporting them with ease. After the children were settled in their beds and the thunder began to fade, we found ourselves on the living room floor. Cozy blankets, steaming tea, and a few flickering candles casting a warm glow between us. It ought to have been an uncomfortable moment, yet it felt anything but. The warmth enveloped me, a cocoon of comfort that felt almost too indulgent. Our conversation meandered through a landscape of topics, touching on the profound and the trivial alike. A conversation that flows with ease, as if you've shared a connection in a past existence. I recounted to him a dream I once experienced, one where I found myself fleeing into the unknown. Not from anything, merely towards something more liberated. He remained silent, devoid of laughter. He merely nodded and replied, "I understand." Then came a pause, the sort that lingers just a heartbeat longer than necessary. He leaned in and gently swept something away from my cheek. A mere crumb, a speck of lint, or perhaps just an illusion of significance. Yet his fingers hesitated, and I allowed them to remain. I remained still. I remained silent. I merely cast my gaze upon him. He gazed at me as if words were poised on the tip of his tongue, yet he restrained them, caught in a web of unspoken thoughts. The couch vibrated softly as my phone buzzed to life. I felt no need to verify. I was certain it was Carter. I chose to overlook it. The buzz resonated like an ominous warning bell. As if a sacred presence had been unsettled. Yet I lingered in that instant, paralyzed, yearning, afraid of my desires and even more afraid of the possibility of losing that sensation. Our lips never met. We refrained from any further contact. Yet, it was unnecessary for us to do so. All that existed between us had already transformed. And just before he stood to leave, he looked at me in that same soft, careful way and said, "I still have that wish, you know." I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't need to because I already knew. That night, he made a wish. A wish that split my world in two. It happened 3 days after the storm. The air still carried that damp heaviness like the sky hadn't quite recovered. Neither had I. Carter was away again. Another urgent meeting. Another hotel room somewhere that wasn't home. The kids were at my sister's for the night. It was supposed to be a break, a moment to breathe. But instead, I found myself lighting candles again. Not for power this time, but maybe for courage. Or maybe for something I couldn't name. Jacob came by to return a set of keys I didn't remember giving him. He stood in the doorway like he didn't know if he should come in, but I moved aside and he stepped in like he belonged there. We didn't speak at first, just sat. The room was quiet, but something about the silence felt thick, alive, like it was listening. I poured wine. He barely touched his. And then out of nowhere, his voice low, almost like he was afraid of it for just one night. "Pretend we're the ones married." Everything inside me stopped. Breath, thought, time. I looked at him. Really looked at him. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't playing. He meant it. My heart pounded in my ears. The room suddenly felt too small, like the walls were closing in around me. I wanted to say no. I did, but I didn't. I didn't say anything. I just stood there staring at the man I wasn't supposed to want, but did, and before I could speak, he crossed the room slow, careful, like he was giving me time to stop him. But I didn't move, not even an inch. His hand reached up, cooped the side of my face. Warm, steady, too tender for what we were about to do. Then he kissed me and I let him. It wasn't a soft kiss. It wasn't gentle. It was full of everything we hadn't said. Every silent dinner, every lonely night, every look that lingered too long. It was pain and comfort tangled together. It was wrong. But it felt like home. His breath trembled. Mine stopped. I didn't know where I ended. And he began. In that moment, there was no Carter. No guilt, no rules, just skin and heat and years of longing. Finally finding a voice. And when it was over, when the air settled and the silence came back, I couldn't look at him. I couldn't look at myself. That night, rewrote everything and nothing would ever feel whole again. Subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold because the next twist changes everything. The morning after, I couldn't look him in the eye. I couldn't even look at myself. I told Jacob I wasn't feeling well. Said I needed time. He didn't argue. He just nodded and left. No hug, no promise, no we'll talk soon. Just the sound of the door clicking shut behind him. And suddenly the house felt colder than it had in months. When Carter came back from his trip, everything looked the same. The furniture in its place, the kids excited to see him, dinner on the stove. But something had shifted and I could feel it pressing against my ribs. He hugged me tight, longer than usual. And for a second, I wanted to disappear into it. I wanted to feel forgiven for something he didn't even know had happened. But I couldn't relax because I knew, and the knowing had made a stranger of me. Over the next few days, I tried to act normal, tried to laugh at his tired jokes, tried to respond with warmth, tried to touch him without flinching inside, but the effort wore me down. Carter started to notice. He didn't say much at first, just stared a little longer than usual, asked if everything was okay. I lied. Said I was just tired. He nodded like he wanted to believe me. Maybe he did. Then came Sunday dinner, the one where Jacob showed up. He was invited like always. Family tradition, Carter was happy to see him. The kids ran into his arms. But when our eyes met across the table, everything in me locked up. He didn't smile. Didn't greet me. Didn't even sit next to me like he usually did. He sat across from me, fork in his left hand, eyes on his plate, like I was just another person in the room, like what happened between us had never happened at all. And that hurt more than anything else. I kept my head down, faked a few smiles, laughed at the right moments, but my hands were shaking under the table, and every time his eyes flicked in my direction, I felt like I was being burned alive. After dinner, everyone sat in the living room watching TV. I excused myself, said I needed to shower. I locked the bathroom door, turned on the water, and collapsed against the tile. The sound of the water masked the sound of my sobs. I sat on the floor, knees pulled to my chest, shaking. I gave into something I didn't understand. And now I can't undo it. I thought I was lonely. I thought I needed comfort. But I hadn't realized the weight of betrayal until I tried to carry it in silence. The water turned cold. I didn't move. I sat there, letting it pour over me like it could somehow wash away what I had done. But it couldn't, because what I broke wasn't something I could see. It was inside me, and it was already cracked beyond repair. I used to think I knew what kind of woman I was. Faithful, patient, good. I wore those labels like armor until they didn't fit anymore. Now I just feel hollow, like someone cracked me open and all the good parts spilled out. I think about my marriage more now than I ever did before, about all the little ways we drifted, the things we didn't say, the touches we stopped reaching for. I tell myself I tried. And maybe I did, but maybe I stopped too soon. Maybe he did, too. There's a quiet kind of pain that comes from being invisible. From feeling like someone you once meant everything to now sees right through you. And I let that pain become something else. I let it pull me into something I never imagined I'd be capable of. I replay that night in my mind constantly. The way he looked at me, the way I didn't stop him, the way it all felt like relief and destruction at the same time. I thought for a moment that maybe we'd talk about it, that Jacob would come back, that we'd make sense of it together. But when I finally gathered the courage to text him, when I asked if we could meet and talk, he replied with one sentence. It was a mistake. I shouldn't have let it happen. He said he was seeing someone new, someone uncomplicated, someone single. And just like that, he was gone. No explanation, no apology, no acknowledgement of what he left me holding. He moved on, but I stayed behind alone with the guilt, the shame, the silence. Some days I wonder if I imagined the whole thing. If I made it bigger than it was. If I assigned meaning to a moment he already forgot. But then I'll walk past the hallway where he once stood. Or I'll find a shirt in the laundry that still smells like the cologne he wore that night. And I know I didn't imagine it. Some nights I still smell his cologne in my sheets. Some mornings I wake hoping it was all a dream. It wasn't. I am both the villain and the victim in a story I never meant to write. And now I carry the ending alone. Was I wrong for saying yes to a wish I never thought I'd grant? Or was I just a woman starving for affection and finally fed the only way she knew how? Because the truth is, I don't even know anymore. I don't know where the line between love and loneliness blurs. I don't know how long a heart can go untouched before it starts reaching for warmth in the wrong places. I know what I did. I know it hurt people. I know it changed me. But I also know what it feels like to be unseen. To be good and beautiful and forgotten. To cry quietly so the kids don't hear. To smile through 1,000 little heartbreaks. To ache for something simple. Just to be noticed. Just to be chosen. If you've ever been torn between loyalty and loneliness. If you've ever sat in the dark wondering how you ended up so far from the woman you used to be, then I want to hear your story. Leave a comment. Let's talk. Not as judge and jury, but as people. As human beings who have all made choices we don't know how to carry. And if this story touched something deep in you, if it made you feel less alone or made you question the things we keep hidden, then subscribe to Heartfelt Tales Unfold. Because here we don't hide the hard parts. We bring them into the light one story at a time. Sometimes it's not betrayal that breaks us. It's the silence that comes after the look in the mirror that you can't quite meet. The nights you lie awake staring at the ceiling wondering if you ruined everything or just exposed what was already broken. And the haunting truth is love when starved can make you do things you swore you never would. Not because you stopped caring, but because you started fading. You never truly know the depth of someone's hunger until they taste something forbidden.